The shadows of Penfield Reef. In the winter of 1916, the Connecticut coast was a desolate place where the wind howled like a grieving widow and the sea churned with secrets. Penfield Reef Lighthouse, perched on a jagged outcrop off Fairfield, stood as a lonely sentinel against the Atlantic's wrath. Its keeper, Frederick Jordan, was a man hardened by solitude. Tending the light that warned ships off the reef's deadly embrace, but this is no tale of heroic duty. This is a story of what lingers in the dark, where the line between man and monster blurs. Frederick was a meticulous man, logging every detail of his isolated life oil levels, weather patterns, the occasional passing ship. His only company was the rhythmic crash of waves and the flickering lantern that burned through the fog. But in early December, something changed. His log entries grew erratic, words scrawled in haste, light flickers without cause, shadows move in the stairwell. At first, he blamed exhaustion. The lighthouse was a grueling post, its spiral stairs winding up to a tower that seemed to hum with unease on stormy nights. But the shadows didn't stop. They danced just beyond his lantern's glow, vanishing when he turned to face them. The tension mounted as Christmas approached. Frederick's entries described whispers in the wind, not just the howl of the gale, but something articulate, forming words he couldn't quite grasp. He wrote of a figure, a silhouette standing at the edge of the reef, staring up at the tower. Each night it grew closer, its form indistinct but human-like, with eyes that glinted like wet stones. He stopped sleeping, his nerves frayed by the constant creak of the lighthouse SI in bones, and the feeling of being watched. The townsfolk on the mainland, when he rode in for supplies, noticed his hollow eyes and trembling hands. The reef's cursed, an old fisherman muttered, but Frederick dismissed it as superstition. He had to. He was a man of reason. On December 22nd, 1916, a gale swept in, fierce enough to churn the sea into a frothing chaos. Frederick's log that day was a single line. It essed in the tower with me. He was due to row ashore for Christmas with his family, a rare reprieve from his post. But the storm made the journey treacherous. He climbed into his small boat, battling waves that clawed at the hull. The lighthouse beam swept over the water, and for a moment, it caught something, a figure standing on the reef, unmoved by the crashing surf. Frederick froze, oar in hand, as the figure raised an arm, pointing directly at him. The boat capsized, and Frederick Jordan drowned, his body never recovered from the Atlantic's grip. The lighthouse was silent after that, its light dimming without explanation. A new keeper, George Warren, arrived in January. He found Frederick's log, its final entries smeared with salt water as if the sea itself had tried to erase them. George laughed off the tailies of curses, but he couldn't ignore the cold that seeped into the tower, far colder than the winter air. Equipment failed without cause, lanterns flickered, gears jammed, and the foghorn wailed unprompted. At night, he heard footsteps on the spiral stairs, heavy and deliberate, ascending but never reaching the top. He chalked it up to the wind, but his dreams were haunted by a man with seaweed tangled in his hair, eyes glinting like wet stones. One night, George woke to a scratching sound, like nails on metal. It came from the lantern room. Heart pounding, he climbed the stairs, the air growing thicker, the shadows coiling like smoke. At the top, the lantern was blazing. But the room was empty except for a puddle of seawater pooling on the floor, forming the shape of a handprint. George fled the lighthouse that night, refusing to return. The townsfolk whispered of Frederick's ghost, doomed to guard the reef he died protecting. But here's the twist. In 1917, a fisherman hauling nets near Penfield Reef pulled up a rusted locket engraved with Frederick's initials. Inside was a photograph not of his wife or children, but of a man with glinting eyes, identical to the figure Frederick described in his log. The fisherman recognized him. Samuel Crowe. The keeper who vanished in 1894 after a similar storm, his boat found splintered on the reef. No one had connected the two men before, but the log's final pages, barely legible, mentioned a name scratched over and over. Samuel. The shadows weren't Frederick's ghost. They were something older. Something that had claimed the reef long before, and Frederick had been its next keeper, not of the light, but of its curse. The lighthouse still stands, its beam cutting through the fog. Visitors report equipment malfunctions, whispers in the wind, and a figure on the reef pointing out to sea. Some say it's Frederick, others Samuel, but the truth is murkier. Like the depths that swallow them both. The reef doesn't just claim ships. It claims souls, binding them to its jagged heart, forever watching from the shadows.